As world leaders make a beeline for the United States for the ongoing United Nations General Assembly meeting, many of them would probably have Afghanistan on their minds. Not just about the fallout of the hasty US withdrawal and the lightning speed with which a bunch of gun toting extremists came to rule the country, but also about who should represent Afghanistan at the General Assembly. Well, this has indeed been a topic of intrigue, speculation, and even very polarized political opinions over the past several days. You see, until now, the Taliban, who are the new rulers of Afghanistan, had not made a formal pitch to the United Nations to be invited for the General Assembly. Now, in the absence of global legitimacy to the insurgent group, given their very violent march to power on August 15th last month, the United Nations office had also largely left the very tangled diplomatic issue relatively untouched. But that has changed now. Taliban has written to the United Nations demanding that they be invited to address the ongoing session in New York. The UN Credentials Committee has confirmed receipt of the letter. In fact, Taliban has also nominated their spokesperson based in Doha, Sohail Shaheen, as the envoy to the United Nations. Now, remember, so far it was widely expected that Ghulam Isaczai, the UN envoy of Afghanistan's toppled government, who has retained his post till now, would represent Afghanistan at the forum. Now, this showdown between the old Afghanistan envoy Ghulam Isaczai and the new envoy Sohail Shaheen, appointed by the Taliban, may not be resolved soon. You know, the Credentials Committee is going to take its time to sort of come to a conclusion on this. But it has presented the world with yet another shocking reality that the violent extremist Islamic insurgents who usurped power last month in Afghanistan will occupy an ambassador's seat at the United Nations. Now, the prospect presents an immediate and a long term challenge. The immediate challenge, of course, for the UN body is to determine whether to accede to Taliban's request to nominate its envoy at the ongoing forum. Now, the decision is a diplomatic hot potato, with many countries still, actually, with most countries still having not recognized the Taliban. Now, the long term challenge is even more critical. The UN is one place where envoys from all kinds of political systems, whether dictatorships or democracies, enjoy some sort of equal standing. Now, because they represent a government or they represent a people. Now, the question is, who do the Taliban represent? Do they represent the Afghan people in their entirety? If that were so, thousands of Afghans, including women and children, would not be risking life and limb to escape the country. No sooner did they take over Kabul. If that were so, the hurriedly announced cabinet by the new rulers would have been an inclusive one with representation from women and minorities. If that were so, the insurgents would not have had to seize power in Afghanistan by force. In fact, a number of top Taliban ministers are blacklisted by the United Nations. The scheduled SARC foreign ministers meeting faced a very similar quandary barely a few days ago. The meeting was set for September 25th in New York on the sidelines of the ongoing United Nations General Assembly. Reports suggest now that Pakistan had asked for a written assurance from Nepal, which is currently the SARC chair, that they will not allow any Afghan official from the previous Ashraf Ghani led government to take part in the meeting. In fact, Pakistan reportedly proposed that a Taliban member take part in the event instead. But other SARC member states objected to Pakistan's request. Disagreements ensued, and the entire meeting was shelved en bloc. Now, remember, Pakistan is the only member of SARC nations that has officially recognized the Taliban and is desperately wants to give them global legitimacy. A place that the United Nations will give just that much coveted legitimacy to the Taliban. The last time, remember, Taliban were in power between 96 and 2001. Only three countries, Pakistan, UAE, and the Saudi Arabia, had recognized that government. Now, to invite a Taliban envoy and give him a seat at the United Nations is tantamount to accepting, Taliban's credibility in the world community. Question is the world really ready to do that with the Taliban just yet? That is the million-dollar question that the United Nations body must grapple with now that the Taliban have staked their claim to a seat at the UN with a letter.